Good morning, everybody. This is Paige Rogowski. I'm on camera right here. And I'm here with Sarah Slessler, who's actually back in our headquarters office. And we have Bree Grossman here with me right now as well. And we're here to talk about and learn more about the department's annual reporting form for cooperating associations, the DPR 973. It's very affectionately known as that. Thank you all for being here today. This is the first of, this is the second of some monthly webinars that we're going to do on the exact same topic. So just be aware of that. If you have some colleagues that you work with that would benefit from attending the next one, our next one will be April 5th, and I believe that one is at 9:30 in the morning, so you're welcome to join us for that. And before we get started into the content, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. So if you would, please open up the chat function in your webinar program, in the Zoom programming. And what you'll see on the bottom, there's a place where it'll say type message here. Look right above that section and it says to, and you'll notice that in the to function, it'll say to all panelists. And if you do a drop-down box, you'll see something that says to all. So play around with that and select the to all. And if you would, please write a message and say hi. Say who you are, where you're from, and let's see how many folks we have from all over the state. Excellent. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you all. So here's the key to this one. We want to do the, when you select to, make sure you select to all participants. Excuse me, all panelists and attendees is what you want to put there. And that way, if there's questions throughout the webinar, you can ask your questions via this chat function, and that way everybody can see what the questions are and what our answers to those questions are going to be. So Sarah and Bree are here to help answer the questions while I'm talking, and then at the end, we will take questions through this chat function in case there's something that wasn't covered. So great to see you all. Well, not see you all, but to see you all on chat anyway. I wish I could see you on the webcam. But it's great to have you here. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started into the content. And first of all, I think, oh, excuse me, I'm going to turn off my camera here so you don't have to look at me looking at my notes, but I'll join you guys in a little bit. Alrighty. So let's dive right into the annual report form. So just a reminder that this is for cooperating associations. And it is required by contract in Exhibit E in the contracts. Let's make sure I can advance my screen here. There we go. So here's the first part of what we're going to cover today. Well, what's changed in the 973? First of all, it's no longer just for cooperating associations. State Parks partners with a lot of different nonprofit partners, not just cooperating associations, and we wanted to make sure that we had a reporting form that fits all types of partnerships. So now it's for our donors, our proud partners, our operators, and there are some of our partners that are both an operator and cooperating association. So we also have a version of the form that's available for those that have two agreements with state parks. The second thing to note is that the reporting will now be on the organization's fiscal year. This will allow for greater transparency because the figures will be consistent with what's reported to the IRS or the Franchise Tax Board. You should also know that this isn't currently required by the contracts that you most likely have with your organization. You'll notice on the contract it still says that 973s are due May 31st. You can, we plan to renew the contracts with this new requirement. The new date will be 15 days after submitting the reports to the IRS or the FTB. You are welcome to opt into that right away if you'd like, but for now you should know that it's still May 31st. Next, financial reporting by park unit is no longer required. So maybe that's good news for you who support multiple park units, but we do want to make sure that you have that information available just in case there's a question or something that needs to be researched. But at this point, you can combine all of your state park support in one column. Another thing that's changed is that the new report includes programmatic and narrative reporting section. So, as we all know, the cooperating associations are much, much more than just financial contributors. They also connect with the community and engage donors in long-term support of state parks. So the new report, the new 973, will capture data that the director, or all of us, and your CALs can use to demonstrate the importance of partnerships to California state parks. Next, we'll soon be requiring written annual plans and then progress reports on those plans. Again, annual planning is currently required by the contract, but it doesn't say it has to be written. So that will change when we start to renew your cooperating associations agreements, and the new requirement will have written annual plans. We'll talk more about the annual planning later in the webinar, and then I will make a plug, and I'll say it a couple more times. On Thursday, our friends at CALPA are going to host a webinar on how to write an annual plan as park partners. So stay tuned for that. Next, in the new report, there is a section for organizational health. This is an optional section, but it's really a tool that you and your colleagues as leaders can use to compare your organization with the common best practices for nonprofit organizations. Again, this section is optional, and you should also note that not everything on the checklist will apply to your circumstance. Depending on the size and the sophistication of the organization, some of these items may be unnecessary. And last but certainly not least, the report is now available for online submission. This is an exciting opportunity to go paperless, and hopefully bear with us because it's going to connect into a brand new database, and there may be some bugs, but stick with it. I think in the end, it's going to give us much better access to the data and be able to tell our story in a new way. So here's how this is going to work. The report that the organization submits will automatically be submitted to the CAL, the Cooperating Association Liaison, with a notification via email. You should know that the organization, once you submit the report, you are certifying that the information contained in the report is true and correct. So you'll want to check and make sure that everything is accurate before you submit the report. Cooperating Association Liaisons, or CALs, can go online to view the report and then approve it. And by approval, what the CAL is doing is checking to make sure that the information presented in the report is consistent with what they know the partnership to be. The programs, the governance of the organization, the financials, donors, and things like that. So recognize that our CALs are not experts in nonprofit management, but they're the ones that know the association best, and so that's why they're going to verify the information before it gets sent up to our partnerships office in Sacramento. So what are we going to do during this transition? So if you report on a calendar year, 2018 is ready to go. You can report tomorrow or this afternoon if you'd like to. So the way you're going to do that is to create your own user account, and we'll walk through that in a moment. And once that's approved, you'll start entering your information. Now, if you report on a fiscal year, meaning something else, some other year that's not January through December, your association can opt to change to the fiscal year reporting, but we will need an interim report. So, for example, if you have a July 1 fiscal year, you can report from the period of July 1, 2018 through December 31st, 2018, and then catch up on the July 1st, 2020 report when the time comes. Regarding written annual planning, hopefully this practice that you're already doing in terms of annual planning, but if it's not, please go ahead and start right now. Remember, planning is a requirement of the contract, and that is a duty that our CALs are assigned as well to assist with the planning. It's also a recommendation of the Partnership Committee of the Transformation Team. And I recommend, personally, that you start this practice right now and write down the goals that you have agreed upon together. So, a couple of questions about this. What should the format be? First of all, there's no specific format to use for annual plans, but if you're curious, our partnership's website has a sample plan that you can use to see what's included in a plan. You'll have the opportunity to work as partners to create a format that works well for both of you. It doesn't need to be lengthy, but it should include key projects, approvals, if they're new or ongoing programs or initiatives, and funding requests. If any of you struggle with trying to rein in everyone asking for money, and this goes both ways, right? I know sometimes our field staff hits up the cooperating associations and our CALs are unaware of that. So this is a great way that you can kind of rein that practice back in. So when you can point back to the annual plan and say, hey, this is what our board of directors agreed upon, and this is what our cooperating association liaison agreed upon, then that's a way you can keep that in check. And once again, I want to add that that CALPA, our friends at the California League of Park Associations, will be hosting a webinar this Thursday afternoon where you can learn a little bit more about the annual planning process, and you can learn from some of our expert cooperating associations. We've got a panel of 3, and they're going to talk with me about how they do their annual planning and some tips and tricks that you can use. I also want to note one more thing about the system is that PDFs are the only acceptable way to upload information. So you'll want to be able to turn all of your documents into PDFs. For this first year, you'll notice that there's a section for the annual plan. For those who don't have something in writing, what you'll want to do is just open up a Word doc, type in something like "our annual plan is coming" or something to that effect, save it as a PDF, and turn it in and upload that document just for this interim transition period. Speaking of things like that PDF upload, there's some tips and tricks that you'll need to know as you use our online system. First of all, there's only one login per organization. So I recommend that you create something that you can share with your treasurer, for example, or your other staff. It doesn't need to be terribly high security, but just know that there's one organization, or excuse me, one login per organization. Note that your progress can be saved, but it doesn't auto-save. So you can save a draft for review by others in the organization, but you'll need to proactively press save on each section before you move on to the next. But again, if you share that login, you can share it with, say, with a treasurer, or if you've got program committee chair, then you can share and have that person fill out the program section. You can have your treasurer fill out the financial section, and you all can collaboratively build the report. You should also know that a user will be logged out if you're inactive for 30 minutes or more. And once again, the database accepts only PDFs, so you'll need to convert all documents that you'll upload to PDF before you upload them. So let's talk about registration. This is a screenshot of the partner registration, user registration screen, excuse me. You'll notice that it looks very similar to most registration screens if you've ever filled this out online. You're going to collect the name, first name and last name, and connect it with the organization. Now the organization box is a drop-down box, and this is important because that's what's going to connect your report with the organization record that we have in the database. Registrations will also need to be approved by headquarters, so just recognize that once you submit and request a user registration login, it doesn't happen in real time. It might take some delay before everything's approved. This is what the home screen looks like. In my example here, you'll see I have down at the bottom there is a cooperating association that's connected, and there's a report form. So there's a contract number, there's a part to add a new report to that record. And that's our first step. And this is what the home screen will look like once you're logged in. So you'll see there's 5 sections in the report. Part 1 is a financial report. Part 2 is for programs. Part 3 is the organizational health checklist. Part 4 is where you'll upload your annual plan and your progress report on the annual plan. And Part 5 is another checklist for legal compliance. Let's walk through Part 1. Part 1 is the financial section, as I mentioned. And it's important to note here that on the top left, there's a required field as indicated by the red asterisk for fiscal year. And this is what's going to connect your organization's data with all the partners' data for the fiscal year corresponding with California State Parks fiscal year. Now, if you happen to be on a July 1st, June 30th fiscal year, that should be easy peasy. But if you're on a calendar year, what you're going to do is select the beginning the beginning year where it says 2018 to 19 for your organization's fiscal year that was for the calendar year of January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018. You'll notice that there's a little check sheet right there too, and if you're on a fiscal year that's not July 1st, just select the fiscal year, the California State Parks fiscal year, that most of the months of your organization's fiscal year are in. So you can see the example that October 1st through September 30th would be in the fiscal year of 2017-2018. So once again, you're going to select the state parks fiscal year that most closely resembles the fiscal year you're reporting on. Then where it says begin date and end date, you will insert the beginning and end dates of your organization's fiscal year. Before we move on, I also want to point out the headers for the columns, and you'll see those in your screen along the bottom. See where it says revenue, and the next column, header, is for a cooperating association. And this is important for organizations that have multiple contracts with California State Parks. What you're going to do is enter your information in that column that most closely resembles your work pertaining to supporting state parks. Now, if your cooperating association does nothing else but support California State Parks, then most of your information is going to go in that first column. But if you happen to have an organization that has another area of business, for example, they support a national park or a local recreation area, then you'll want to be able to break that out into cooperating association or the non-DPR related. So there's a section where you'll report any activity that's not related to your support of California State Parks. And then for those of you who are familiar with working with the IRS 990 forms, you'll see a breakout area for management in general and fundraising as well. This should closely match the IRS 990 form. And the columns will total on the right. Here is, if you were to scroll down on your screen once you're in the report, here you'll notice that there are other this is where you'll enter the revenue section. You'll see this is significantly condensed from what it was in the previous financial reports. State Parks is asking for reporting on contributed income, so donations, philanthropic grants, as well as earned income, which is things like fee-based programs or tickets that you sell for special events, or merchandise sales. Just a note here that your membership program could be either. For most of our cooperating associations, membership is strictly a philanthropic vehicle, basically a way for folks to give to your organization every year. So that's most likely a contribution. But it could also be earned income if the benefits that you give to your members is significantly more than, is significant, I should say. Check with the IRS on that. You're probably familiar with whether or not your membership contributions are tax deductible. Here I want to point out too that there are instructions on our website, on the partnerships section of the California State Parks website. There's instructions with a lot more detail on how to enter the various forms of revenue and expenses. In particular, the instructions give examples of what should be on each row. There's also a sheet of examples that can show you how to classify common income and expense items. And once again, you'll find that on the partnership section of our website. On the right, you'll see that we noted the total columns, and these should match up to various line items on the 990. Now, we only noted the 990 form here, but in the instructions, you'll see where these totals should match what's on the 990 easy. So do check those instructions. Let's take a look at expenses. Here's a screenshot of the expense table. Once again, you'll see that this is as condensed as possible. Naturally, State Parks is interested in what was contributed to State Parks during that year. So you'll see that there are rows for financial aid to DPR and non-financial aid. And remember that financial aid can be cash, money, anything that's donated to State Parks in the form of cash or a check written. Typically, that means the association writes a check for a deposit into a contingent fund. This row should only show monetary contributions to DPR. The next row down, under supplies and donated materials, you'll see non-financial aid to DPR. This is where the association will capture a donation of items, such as interpretive materials or food for volunteer recognition. And then you'll see on the next row down, service aid to DPR. This would be a donation of services. For example, if your organization hosts a state park website or conducts outreach or interpretive programming on behalf of the partnership. And here I want to bring us right back to that annual plan. The association should be recording financial and non-financial or service aid to DPR if that's something that you and your CAL have mutually agreed upon is supporting state parks. If there's disagreement with some of these categories, then you should take the opportunity to discuss it as partners and come to alignment in your next annual plan. Most of the rest of these categories are probably pretty familiar with anyone who's looked at financial reports. So I'm going to move on from here, and we can talk more about this later. Again, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end if you'd like. So let's talk about programs. And as we talk about programmatic alignment as it pertains to the annual planning, you'll see that this is where we're going to record some of that detail. This section should only include programmatic support of California state parks. So in other words, if your organization has an other area to their mission or to their business, then do not include any of that information here. It's only for your programmatic support of California state parks. In section 2A, there's areas of programmatic support. And you'll see the first row is direct funding, full, direct funding, partial, donated services, donated goods, capital development, or other. And on the bottom, there's an area where you can provide more detail on the programmatic areas that you support. Looking across to the first row, you'll see the headers for interpretation and education, natural resources, cultural resources, operations and maintenance, and then another header for the value of the contribution that's provided. So, how do I use this tool? Let's say that your association provides $20,000 a year that goes towards an interpretive staff person. Your organization writes a check to the department for $20,000 every year that's put into a contingent fund and then helps support that salary. The way that'll be noted here is the second row down, direct funding partial, and then you'll check interpretation and education. And then on the far right, you'll note that, the value of that contribution is $20,000. And note that it's partial funding of a program because it is $20,000 most likely does not cover the full salary of the interpretive position. So you're partially funding that interpretive position. Now, if your organization covers the entirety of of a state park's interpretive position. Let's say you contribute $55,000. I hope that's the right amount. I'm actually not sure. But you know that they're fully funded. Then you're going to select that first row, direct funding full. Then you're going to select interpretation and education, check that box. And all the way on the right, you'll input $55,000. Now, let's say your organization contracted and had produced some interpretive panels that are going to go into the visitor center. So what that would be is donated goods, interpretation and education, because it's for the visitor center, and then the value of what was produced. Let's say it was $10,000. So input $10,000 to the right. Let's say your organization coordinates a group of volunteers that does trail restoration. In this case, you're going to select donated services and natural resources and the value of that contribution. And I think some of you may know that you can go to the website called Independent Sector and calculate the number of hours, and they have a rate every year that they value volunteer service at, and I believe it's 26 something per year, per hour. And you can put in a monetary value of that contribution. Last but not least, let's say your organization is undergoing a restoration project, say a new roof for the historic property. And your organization is giving $50,000 towards that effort. So you'll select capital development, then maintenance, and then enter $50,000 as the value. And if there's something that won't fit in these categories, you can always select other and provide more detail in the box down below. Next, part 2B is for sales operation. And as we know, it's not the service that cooperating associations provides to state parks is not just the sale of the items themselves. Oftentimes our stores are important places that provide visitor services. They're the front line for many of our visitors to California state parks. So we wanted to capture the value of the entire sales operation, not just the items that were sold. So here you'll see there's a value of inventory, and then there's gross sales, and then the cost of goods sold. And then here on the second to last row, you'll see there's a section for sales operation cost. And that is where you can note things like rent, or if you have to employ a sales manager, you can include the salary for that person. Anything that would demonstrate the true value of operating sales on behalf of California State Parks. And then at the end, it will calculate as a net income. Part 2C is for community and donor engagement. So here is just a checklist of some possible areas in which your association supports California State Parks above and beyond what we can do for ourselves. So as I mentioned before, if you have your own volunteer program, again, this is not supporting the VIP program, but if your association directs and has its own volunteers, you can check that box. You can indicate the quantity of volunteers. For example, we have 50. You can look at independent sector and calculate the monetary value of those volunteer contributions. And then if you have additional information, you can enter it into that checkbox. There's a section for publications that are produced on behalf of California State Parks, any marketing that is done, media outreach on behalf of state parks, people who've reached at outreach events. If you go to different events and represent the park in that case and try to gain interest in visiting the park, record that value here. Here's also where you can note how many donors there are to your organization, members there, and also special events that are conducted and produced by your organization. If you have a major donor program, you can note that here. If you have a plan giving program, note that here. And if you currently have an endowment, you can note that as well as the value of that organization. This particular section is meant to be flexible. So here, hopefully you can use this as an area to show all the various ways that you support California state parks. Let's move on to part 3, organizational health. As I mentioned before, this is an optional section. It's really just a tool that you and your colleagues can use as a way to see if how you're measuring up against other nonprofit organizations. It's a checklist of common best practices, and some of these may or may not be applicable to your organization. I also want to note here that as a requirement of the contract, any updates to the bylaws or articles of incorporation do need to be reported to California State Parks. Our authorizing statute, which is Public Resources Code 513, requires that organizations include the support of California State Parks as part of their articles of incorporation. So if that needs to change, or if that does change rather, then the organization is no longer authorized to be a cooperating association. So do keep in touch with us about any changes both to the bylaws or the articles of incorporation. Here's a list of the organizational health topics to give you an idea of what's included. Again, if your organization doesn't have staff, then a staffing plan won't apply. Moving on to section 4. While this might be, the annual planning section might be the biggest part of, biggest change to this report, it's actually the smallest section in terms of what is going to be uploaded. That's because the bulk of what you'll do is going to be done offline as you prepare your written annual plan. Again, this is just a tool for you to document with your CAL what you're planning to do for the year and come to agreement in writing. So there's no right way to do this as long as it's useful for both partners. And once again, my third and final plug, maybe not final, but our third plug for our webinar happening on Thursday afternoon. Thanks to our partners at CALPA, we're going to take a dive into how annual planning works for 3 of our partners. Part 5, legal compliance. This section is another checklist. And there are certain forms or filings that must be done in order for your organization to be a nonprofit in the state of California. Then there's also some requirements that State Parks includes in the agreement. And you'll see all of them listed here and a place to upload the appropriate documents. So as an organization, you and your CAL will check to make sure that all the appropriate documents are uploaded. And sometimes it might not be a required field in order to submit, so do be aware of that. Here's a list of what's included in there, and it does vary by agreement, so be aware of that. There's the federal forms, the Internal Revenue Service 990 filing, and for you, that might be a 990N, a 990EZ, or a 990, just the regular document. Whatever it is, upload it into a PDF. Even if it's proof that you submitted the 990N online, then you'll upload that to show that your filing has been done. Then there's State of California requirements. There's the Franchise Tax Board 199 filing. The cooperating association agreement requires either a independent financial audit, review, or compilation, depending on the size of your organization. So you'll take that financial report and upload it here. The Attorney General requires charitable registration every year. This is the form RRF1. You'll upload proof of that registration as well. And then depending on if your organization does sales, there may be some franchise sales tax due. You can upload your information there. There may be property tax if you own property. And I believe it's every other year, there's the Secretary of State Statement of Information, which is the SI 100 form. So you'll upload that if you were required to submit that this year. Then there's contractual requirements with the cooperating association agreement. As you know, the department requires approval of sales item, so you'll just check that that was done. You'll upload your current board roster for records. Then there's the certificate of insurance that's due every year. And every 3 years, the organization must complete the contractor's certification clause. And this is a requirement of the Department of General Services for all contracts with people of California. So cooperating associations are not unique in this. You'll just sign that and upload it if it's due. Next, once everything's been inputted, it's time to submit your report and certify that the information is true and correct. So this is what the screen will look like when the information is input, but before it's submitted. You'll notice on the left that there are edit buttons now, not just add. They say edit, and that's where you or your colleagues can go in and view the information, save it, and go into the next section and so on. And then on the bottom, you'll notice that there's the certification button right there. It says, I certify that the information contained in this report is true and correct to the best of my knowledge. So here is where the association will certify that this information is true, and then they'll hit submit. Once they hit submit, the program will send an email to the cooperating association liaison to review the submission. And remember that our partnerships office is not involved in that process unless you have a question. So we don't see it until the CAL approves it and sends it up to our office as well. Before we get to questions, and we're almost done here, I just want to let you know that we've got several resources available to you. First is the webinars. Obviously, we're in the second of our webinars today. We have 2 more scheduled, and we will continue to schedule them monthly as long as they're useful to our partners or our CALs. As I mentioned, there are extensive instructions that are located on the partnership website, parks.ca.gov/partnerships. CALPA has their online training on annual planning next Thursday. I guess that's my 4th mention of it. Hopefully you'll all come. And I mentioned there was a sample annual plan and examples of revenue and expenditure classifications, and as well as the cooperating association policies and guidelines. Those are also on the partnerships website. And if you have any questions that your CAL can't help you with, you can also contact me, Sarah, or Bree, and their information is located here. So that being said, if there are still some lingering questions that have not been answered, I can answer some questions. So once again, you'll want to check down to the bottom of the chat button, and when you select 2, hit all panelists and attendees. And Brenda asks if CALs have received the training on new procedures. They have. There were some CALs that were not able to attend the training, so potentially your CAL might not have had the information, but I believe most have. And Lois is asking when the reports are due. So Lois, right now, your cooperating association contract says May 31st, and sorry, oh, you guys are hitting with great questions. It currently says May 31st. We plan to change that when the time comes, when the renewals come, and they will be due within 15 days of submitting the IRS or Franchise Tax Board reports. So essentially, when all of your financial reports are submitted to the feds and the state, you can submit it to us as well. So do take a look at that, and you're welcome to opt into that right now as well. Henry, how would we account for payments made to private contractors to do stuff like maintenance? That would be service aid, because if the organization is if the organization is paying for a service to be done, meaning they're not paying state parks, they're paying someone like a contractor, but that certainly does benefit and provide a direct benefit to state parks, so you'll include that as service aid to DPR. Carolyn just confirmed there's 1 login per organization. So yes, you don't need to have your mother's maiden name or your first pet or anything like that. You can make it a pretty simple login, and then share that with your internally with your organization as well. I'll also mention that our staff can reset a password. So if it's ever forgotten, or if you happen to have an organizational email address, something like we're the best association at gmail.com, use one of those, and that way hopefully continuing board members will have access to that information as well. Connie asks if a bookkeeper and CPA can attend one of our seminars. Yes, we will be doing these monthly until they're no longer needed, so you're welcome to have someone join our next one, which is April 5th. We're also in the process of uploading this to our partnerships website as a recorded webinar as well, so you can look at it offline. Marcella, we have our own visitor center, and it's not on a park property. Oh, and we sell items that fund the program, which provides the sole interpretation for the elephant, seal, or rookery. Okay, great. Do we need DPR approval for those items, and do we need the inventory of those items on the DPR report? Marcella, why don't we talk offline? I know Friends of Elephant Seal has a somewhat different situation than many of our cooperating associations. I think that the short answer is yes, but let me make sure I'm understanding everything involved in that. So if we could talk offline, that would be great. Oh, great. So Peggy Roning asked a really good question for our CALs who are on the call. I did not mention this, but as you log into, I'm sorry, you don't actually need to log in. So if you are on your computer on the Parks network, you're automatically logged into the database, and you're assigned to your partner automatically. So you'll only be able to view your partner's information, and you don't need to create a login. And Cynthia, I think I answered this one too, but if only one person can be logged in at a time. So even with that one login, I'm pretty sure that is true. I don't know that we've tested it, but so in other words, even though you're using the same login, if you're using the same login on 2 different computers, I don't think it's going to work. And yes, I'm planning on, we're in the process, it's amazing how difficult some processes are, but uploading the previously recorded webinar has proven to be challenging, but we hope to get that up pretty soon. I also will most likely send it out to all cooperating associations and to the liaisons when the recorded version is online. I'll also point again to these resources, and I will make the slides available too. Richard asks if a second person logging on would be bumped. I think just rejected. Yeah, I don't think you'd be able to log on. And I think I have hit most of my questions. I'm going to look at my colleague and see if there was anything that wasn't addressed while I was busy talking. But it looks like everything was covered. Unless anyone has any additional questions, we can go ahead and end the webinar soon here. I want to thank you all for coming today and participating virtually. I think this is such a cool opportunity that we have to connect throughout the state, thankfully for technology. Once again, your cooperating association liaison they're available to answer any specific questions that you might have. Our information is right here as well. Our partnerships office is here to help. We're here to support the liaison as well too. So do work through your CAL please first, and then contact us if possible, or if you still need to. And once again, thank you so much for all the work that you do. We are so grateful to be working with you as cooperating associations and appreciate everything that you do. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. And we'll see you later.